sensor versus the front O2 sensor. So here we go.
Hello, Eric.
Hey, good morning, guys. Or good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, we got a bigger group today. So, Nico, you're in the back. What's do we have a?
No, I'm right here. We have the same group.
Oh,
The table's displayed. The table's displayed differently. So, yeah,
I like it.
Same
It's a
group.
nice setup.
Thank
So
you.
do we have a team that's working on the rear O2s?
Yes, we have Daniel. It's supposed to be Daniel and Johnny. Daniel's over there. Daniel's making a sandwich because he has been putting the wires on pin number 95. And what's the other one, Daniel? So pin 95 is our A channel, I believe. The other one is a heater negative. Heater negative.
So it's going to be B channel.
Okay, B. What's the other? What's the A channel?
The A channel is sensor signal.
Sensor signal. Okay, and these are both for rear O2.
Yes.
Okay, rear O2, sensor signal, and heater negative is what we've got hooked up right now.
So last week we looked at the 5-wire wideband O2 sensor with a scope, and this week we're gonna follow up with that with scan data, and then that way you get a sampling of the approach for diagnostic on that sensor. Does anybody have any input or observations or opinions about the results of the scoping the wideband sensor from last week?
Anybody? Just take the mic. Does anybody have a question about what we did last week?
And what about the heater circuit? Anybody want to give me a rundown? If I see a heater circuit that's got 10 volts on it, what's that telling me?
Heater's turning
I can
off.
barely hear you guys.
Somebody grab the mic and talk into it. Somebody talking to the mic.
He's doing
What was the question?
Oh, if I had a heater circuit with 10 volts on it, what is that telling me?
Wait, what?
The O2 sensor heater circuit. Some guys were kind of surprised. We looked at the heater circuit and we weren't sure what was happening there, and so we went over that circuit and we looked at it on the scope, which was probably the most effective test that we did on that sensor, in my opinion. But we saw that some information. We learned some information and understood what was happening with the control of the heater. And I was asking if the heater circuit had 10 volts on it, what does that tell you? All right, what if the heater circuit has 0 volts?
Winter knows.
All right, let's hear it.
Yeah, so if the heater circuit has like 10 volts on it, that means that the computer's shutting the heater off. It's like in the process of shutting it off.
It might be shutting it off. Could it be turning it on?
Oh, well, if we're going in that direction, yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, what he said.
Yeah, maybe it's turning it on 10%, 20%, right? because we assume the car's running, so we're going to have something like 14 volts. So 4 volts of that is going to be being applied to the heater or being pulse width modulated on. So we've got a heater circuit that's probably on 20 to 30%, something like that, right?
So
If it has
so
zero
uh,
volts,
so we may want to stop. We may want to pause right here because this is where I always had a very hard time in class, and stuff would go way over my head really fast
okay,
because the low voltage thing, it makes you think that it's turning. It makes you might think if you have no voltage or low voltage that something's off.
what's he saying?
Question. So Felipe is saying it matters if the time when the engine's warming up or if the engine's not warming up or whatever. Yeah, but Eric's question is why? What does 10 volts mean? It doesn't matter if the car is piping hot or stone cold. It doesn't matter, right? What does 10 volts mean? What is the heater doing when it's normally a B plus circuit, right? So it's going to be 14 volts idling, and you
Okay,
you're 10 volts. Then what happens?
let's just come back around for a second. Anybody look at your notes from last week? What circuit did we what wires did we look at on the heater circuit that they were probing? Let's just start there.
Start there. There you go.
For the heater, I think it's the same value for this week as well. If we're looking at the heater, we're looking at you guys chose heater value what?
It was where Noah and Felipe were probing last week. Like what wires were they probing? It was
Ion aux plug.
here, right?
Successfully.
Here, Noah, grab that. Take that and talk into it. The heater.
There was we plugged into the heater negative, the ion aux pump, and then we had the set point and the virtual ground.
Okay, so heater negative, and we determined the ME controlled the heater circuit on time, right?
Yeah.
So it's grounding that circuit. So if we're looking at the ground side of the heater, right? So if you have full system voltage at that wire,
It would be
What's
probably
that
about
indicate?
4 volts.
what's that?
It would be about 4 volts.
Oh no, on the heater?
Yeah, on the heater.
No, it's going to be full system voltage.
I thought we just said though that it would drop 4 volts.
Oh, if that was the question, that was the first question, which was if I had a value of 10 volts, what does it tell us?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and then Nico wanted to just stop and revisit this, and so if we're looking at the negative or the control side of the heater, there's going to be voltage applied, all the time, right? So it's going to get full system voltage. And if you're measuring at the ME on the negative side or the control side, the ground side, and it's not turned on, you're going to see what?
14 volts.
Exactly, full system voltage. All right. So if your meter is connected, you've got your ground lead connected to ground, and your positive lead is on that ground circuit or the control side of the heater, and you got full system voltage, there's a difference there. That means there's no ground path for the heater. The heater is off. It's not turned on at all. Right? Does that make sense?
Correct.
So as
Yeah,
the
that makes
DME
sense.
starts to switch to ground, it'll pulse width modulate to ground. So it starts switching. Bring. switching low, switch high, switch low, and then the amount of time it stays low is going to be the duty cycle, right? So you're going to see a proportional voltage drop because your measurement device, this being a meter, we'll see in the scope here, is going to average out the value for you. That's going to, the on time is going to equate to a certain amount of voltage drop, right? So if it wants to turn it on 50%, you'll see how many volts? 7 volts, right? Because it's on 50%. The rest of the time it's high. And it's on 50% for 50% of the time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then if it wants, if it's cold start, it's going to go full on. You'll see how many volts. The heater's completely on.
Yeah, 0.
0 volts.
Or
That's right. Oh, that's not going to work. Oh. Exactly. So it's on 100%. It is, it's cooking the heater right now. Let's get that thing up to temperature as quickly as possible. You just get up to 600 degrees before it starts, operating. And we looked at some other values there that can carry over to all oxygen sensing devices or mixture feedback devices that we deal with, which would be wideband sensors and the rear O2, which is a standard, Nernst cell standard O2 sensor, 0 to 1 volt scale. But what did we see that comes from the ME into the sensor that lets the sensor know when it's actually operating and going into closed loop? Does anyone remember that? I just jumped off the heater and went over to the sensing side. Sorry. I should have been clear there. Let me just stop for a minute before we go there. Everyone cool with the heater? Any questions with the heater? Yeah. Felipe, you're good? All right. All right, so we're gonna look at the heater again today. Same path, negative side. So we'll just take a look at that. But on the sensing side, the sensor wire, what did we see? What did we see there? We going into the sensor, coming from the control module initially. So
you're talking about the front O2 sensor?
Yeah, on the front, and we'll see it on the rear too, or the rear one as well. Is the car's not running right now, is it?
No.
Okay, it's cold.
It's it's cold.
Cool.
We had to start it to bring it in, but
okay,
it's been off for a little while now.
Yeah, it'll be an open loop, and that's really what I'm getting at is how does the ME determine if the sensor is operating, when to switch over to closed loop? When does it know that sensor is working, and it can depend on it for feedback?
Say it.
Okay. Do we have the scope set up right now? It's on some signals.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. Let's see.
It's on.
All these are going to be. Oh, geez, what's going on there? It's going to be. We'll go into 2-volt range. Oh wait, which one's the heater circuit?
Which one's the heater, Daniel? The heater negative is A or B? B is heater negative.
Okay, we'll leave that there.
And then which is the red one, and then the blue. Our blue. What's our blue?
Blue is sensor signal.
Sensor signal is blue. See that way. The reason why, just for the future, real quick, just housekeeping stuff. Whenever we hook the stuff up, and when we call out the red wire and the blue wire, we put I put a little key up here on the Pico to mark blue, red, green, yellow. So just use those colors. That way, it shows up as this color on the screen. So we could say the blue wire, and then Eric can see the blue line is the blue wire.
Or
right?
channel A. So it's interchangeable.
Yep.
We just stay consistent with the setup.
Yep.
But yeah, blue wire or channel A, red or B, C or green, D. So we'll see all of that. All right. So what is channel A connected to, or the blue channel?
Sensor signal. Sensor signal on pin number what, 37 you said? Pin 37. Sensor signal.
And is the key on? The key's on right now.
It should be on there.
I'll launch the scope or the scanner. All right. So what I was getting at here, which is totally being debunked. Okay. All right. All right. I'm gonna share my screen for a second. We'll look at the voltage, but we looked at it last week, and I think it was one of the points that was kind of key. We touched on it for a minute, and then we went away from it, but it's pretty important. Is the DME, or the ME in this case, since it's a Mercedes, is sending out a voltage on that signal line always, and it's 450 millivolts. So that 450 millivolt bias voltage comes from the control module. And when the sensors, when we get the heater turned on, so we've got, 0 volts on the heater's negative side, right? So the heater's on full, and then within 45 seconds or so or less, we've got activity. How does it know it's got activity? Because the sensor voltage moves from 450 millivolts, and it starts to move above and below, right? And once it moves off approximately 300 millivolts either way, then that's adequate, depending on the emissions certification. That's adequate to call it closed loop. And at that point, it's going to it'll go into closed loop, and it's relying on the sensor for feedback for mixture control. So if you're trying to determine, is this a problem with the sensor, or is this a problem with the control module? A quick and dirty test is unplug it, key on. Do I have 450 millivolts coming down that signal line from the ME? If you don't, there's a problem upstream. We don't even need to mess with the sensor. Does that make sense? So maybe put a note there. Bias voltage on the signal line, 450 millivolts, 500 millivolts, but it's typically 450. A little bit of throwback knowledge for the old guys out there. They can shake out some cobwebs. And for young guys, if you're doing doing inspection 1 or inspection 2 on a E30 325 or a 528 E28, and you gotta set the mixture and set your air flap adjustment on your airflow meter, right? And your air bleed screw. It's got a single wire sensor or 3-wire sensor. You get it up to operating temperature so that it's switching, then unplug it and make your mixture adjustments while it's unplugged, while the sensor is still active, until you get an average of 450 millivolts, right? Averaging. Plug it back together, but you'd want to make sure that you had, if you had an earlier sensor that was just a single wire sensor, a lot of times those DME circuits could be damaged because they were often crimped replacements, right? So you could find that circuit has been grounded, and you might not have 450 millivolts coming down that wire, but you're trying to set your mixture and it's just not happening. Check to see if you've got 450 coming down the line from the control module. That's probably where we use it a lot, but even today, I've just last week I helped a guy. He was having problems with a mixture control and feedback from the sensor, and that was one of the checks we did. It's like, hey, do you have 450 millivolts coming from the ME? He ended up having a wiring issue. So, all right. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll jump over here. Let's see. We're going to share screen. We're going to go to. Okay. We're going to go to the window. I like this one right here. Okay. I'm going to jump this over to the scan tool. We're working on Mercedes. What happened? What? Why did it do that? I selected Mercedes. It did that. All right, so we should be getting in there in just a moment. And the key is on, you say?
Yeah, let's make sure that the key is still on.
Must be. All right.
Yes, the key is still on.
So we're just going to start with key on. I'm going to go and change this up here. Just make this range.
Oh, Felipe is asking why you went into the Mercedes side instead of the OBD2 generic.
Oh, right. We are doing, that's right. I forgot. Forgot we were using, that's default.
Yeah, you still win right here. That. Oh wait, go back one. It doesn't matter.
Yes. He's in
It's in
Subaru.
Subaru now.
Yeah, but if it's in generic, it'll say generic at the top, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So you're in a Subaru.
Yeah, I don't know how I got there.
Yeah.
I selected the Mercedes, which we go back over here. All
There
right.
it is. That's why the Mercedes, it didn't see the
So now it's in
Mercedes
Fiat.
thing because it was in Subaru. Huh.
Yeah, so now it's in a Fiat.
That's weird. Why is it doing that? You know
I think
why?
it has
'Cause you-
something to do with my mouse control on.
Yes. Here, let's just do it from here.
Yeah, probably
Escape.
ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably his mouse.
Okay. Yeah.
Make it
Yeah.
lag.
Check engine. Yeah. EOBD. There we go. Now you're in
Okay.
it.
Go to auto scan. Let's just set something up here. I'm going to hit the trigger on this for a second.
Oh, he's doing the scope over here.
All right. So do we want to look at faults first, or we want to go right into live data? Because if it were me and I was going to follow the same routine, then I would always look at faults first. And of course, what?
And what else? Faults and what?
Freeze frame data.
There are no faults. All right.
winter day.
But freeze frame data. Freeze frame data.
That's right.
I can't say it enough. Freeze frame data. Just keep saying it. Let's see, how often is this? If you look over at the Pico for a second, I was just intrigued by this. We've got this pulse that's happening every. Let's get this guy right here. All right, let's go. So let's bring this over here. What do we got? This is interesting. So this is totally not what I was expecting to see, right? I'm expecting to see 450 millivolts on this starting out. If we go to live data, this is every 600 milliseconds, there's a pulse. Calculated load. Okay, so from last week, this is our oxygen sensor current, right? Which is a value that did you have a value that you were able to record in your on your notebook page for the front sensor, the 5-wire wideband air fuel sensor?
No.
Okay. It was pretty much stuck at negative 10.5 milliamps, if I remember correctly. Is that correct? So this time we're gonna look at that with scan data. Just remember that some notes on OBD2, and this comes into play especially with BMW on V8 engines. But in general, your front sensor, if it's a wideband sensor, the operating voltage is going to be in the 5-volt range, right? The OBD2 mandates that the output for the scan tool be in the 0 to 1 volt range. So they have to show an equivalency in the scan tool. So we're going to have an equivalency ratio there. So here they're using lambda instead of the 0 to 1. So they're allowed to use a lambda factor. Or you can use a voltage equivalency, which will be a 0 to 1, even though the signal is not moving 0 to 1. Does that make sense? So keep that in mind. It's easier to use the lambda equivalency ratio than to really trust and depend on the voltage equivalency value. Now, if you've got two banks, left bank and right bank on a V engine, especially with BMW, they're going to mirror each other because they're only required to show you bank 1. So that's all they're going to show you in OBD2. So keep that in mind. If you're looking at the values from bank 1 and bank 2 and you know there's a difference, something's going on, and they're mirroring each other, that's what you're getting. So it's not probably on N63. They're probably showing you both, but on N62, oftentimes you'd only get bank 1 just mirrored on bank 2. All right. So just a note about that. We're gonna go down here. Oh, where's our ambient temperature? Is that it? That can't be the bottom. Is that the bottom of the list? It is the bottom of the list. Okay, so what happened here? I shot right by it.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the O2 sensor, the rear O2 sensor values. We've got, we're going to be right in this area. Oh,
There's the oxygen sensor bank 1.
so that's the front.
That might be, yeah, but look at that. Hold on.
1.27. Okay. So we're just going to keep that there.
You have to click info. If you click that arrow, if you click the arrow on the right and then click info, I believe, the I button, it'll give you the whole, yeah, sensor 2. So that's the one. Yes.
So it's showing a voltage of 1.275. Okay. So what is that? What is that? I just told you it's going to be 450 millivolts. Why is it showing 1.275? Because I'm wrong.
Just seeing.
That guy is just flat wrong. I'm making an assumption as that they're using just a standard oxygen sensor circuit, which most manufacturers still are using, just a 0 to 1 volt sensor for the rear sensor. But this is using an LSU sensor. So this was a Bosch LSU sensor. We saw it, I saw it applied on the BMW product right around MS45, I believe. And we get a sensor value that is in the 5 volt range. It flips, our common understanding of air fuel ratio. It used to be that when we saw a higher voltage, that was a rich condition, and a lower voltage would be a lean condition. Well, the LSU sensor, uses a 5 volt range, and those values are flip flopped. Kind of the same as the current on the wideband sensor, following the same feedback structure. So this is using an LSU rear sensor, and that the reason they started using them in the front was a wider sensing range with more accuracy. So that tells me if this is using this as a post catalyst sensor, this vehicle probably can trim using the rear sensor. So there's probably some fuel strategies or some fuel management strategies that incorporate the rear sensor to actually do some fuel trim adjustment. And that's something you would want to keep in mind if you were having drivability issues on a vehicle that's on the east side of the Rockies, where exhaust leaks could be prevalent. That would definitely could affect performance, exhaust leaks, and using a sensor like this as a trimming sensor. Does anyone have any questions on that?
What does LSU stand for? What does LSU stand for?
Oh, great.
Is Louisiana State University. All right, there you go. Daniel's over here trying to fake Felipe out. Gee's
I
over
had to
here
grab reference
giving
material.
him the rub down. Jesus, dude.
What we got?
Girlfriends say.
This is going to be.
All right, let's ask her. All right.
What's that?
Ya ni see nothing.
Was it a question or statement?
What is LSU?
Oh yeah, that got that question. I just thought you guys had something else. It's right here at the front. Could have swore it was right here. Okay, maybe it's MS40. That's 45.
Well, okay. So who cares about that anyways? Let's fire this
Yeah,
thing up.
it's
And
kind of a. It's. I will have the answer before the end of the broadcast. I guarantee it. But so in this case, what we're looking at is our voltage value is we got 1.5 on the screen. It's showing 1.275. So that's going to be your mid range. And the question I had is, what about this polling post? I'll call it a polling pulse. Every 600 milliseconds, this thing is sending out a pulse. And why is it doing that? Any ideas? We're getting that to 5 volts, right? Something like that, or 3 volts. Okay, so 3 volts. So it's pulling, say about 0.5 volt that way, and about a little less. We got what's the difference here? It is. So it's basically making sure the circuit, it's checking circuit integrity while key is on. So every 600 milliseconds, it's just sending out a pulse. And if it doesn't see the expected feedback, then it's going to set an O2 sensor circuit fault. And then we're not going to see that on here. So location of sensors. Let's just see if we've got, I'm going over here. Let's make sure we've got all our PIDs. We got RPM. RPM. ECT. Two coolant temperatures there. All right. And then the status of fuel system. All right. Okay, let's show what we've got, and then we'll start the engine and start looking at some stuff, and we'll record. I think we've got what we got going on here with this. Let's see. Buffer.
All right, Danny, you ready to start it?
Almost. Right. So that should give us, it says 3 of 3. We should be able to push this out.
Oh, it's because it's stopped right now. That's why.
Yeah.
There you go.
So if it runs, we should get 64. All right. Cool. Nope, we're getting only 3.
Yeah.
Is it the sample rate? Memory. There you go. All right, let's see what that does for us.
What's he
1
doing?
of 1.
Sleeping?
3 of 3. Okay, so that should. We can turn this. We can go ahead and turn the trigger off. Let's increase these samples. that many samples. That's good. Okay. All right. And then we'll pull up our graphs. Ah, I keep that one up there. Where did our rear sensor go? Thought we had it pulled up.
Does it keep going up or no?
Right there.
It was. I think it was at the top.
If he just hits you off, it'll put all of them at the top.
No, he needs to find the other one.
Oh, yeah.
You mean the rear too?
Yeah,
Okay.
Like,
Oh,
click
it's right there.
Right there.
There it is.
1.2 volts. Faster. Oh, it's right there. Yeah.
bank one, sensor two. Okay, so that's that. Oh, that's what happened when we bank one. Oh, wait.
Oh, that's done. Yeah. Oh, now I know.
Just grab that. All right. So it's showing. Or essentially, it's essentially the same. There's going to be a little offset, right? Because there's a floating ground inside the ME. It's probably about 200 millivolts, 250 millivolts off zero as a sensor ground. But why would that be? Why would there be a floating ground? So inside the control module, zero is not ground. It's sometimes 150 to 250 millivolts. There's a range in there. Why would that be the case? Let me see here. I can so on inside the control module, you'll see this on the wiring diagram sometimes. We talked about it last week, where the signal comes in and then there'll be a little square with a little arrow coming off of it indicating a monitor, and then it goes to ground. Well, that little square, or it's a rectangle actually, represents a resistor. There's a pull-up resistor there, or a dropping resistor, and that resistor is going to set the ground and above zero, right? Because we're using voltage drop, that resistor is going to use some of the voltage available, so there has to be a little bit of voltage left over. Well, that little bit of voltage, it's going to take about 250 millivolts to get that resistor is going to use the last 250 millivolts. So it sets an artificial 0 point inside the control module. If it actually comes, the signal comes in to that point where it's monitoring right before the resistor, and it shows 0, the control module can set a fault for short to negative. And it knows for sure, because it shouldn't be 0. It should be 250 millivolts, right? It sets that artificial 0 inside their first sensor 0. All right, let's go ahead and start the car. We'll take a look at our sensor. We're and see how long it takes. Do we have we should have it up here to show the graphs. We should also see when it goes into closed loop, right? All right, so now we're you might want to open this up a little bit. That's a little better. What's going on here? Do we have the heater operating? Is the car? I don't think it's.
Wiggle it, Daniel.
I don't see anything happening on the heater side. Although, I mean, with the key on, we should have seen system voltage, right? That would have been channel B.
There you go.
There it is. Okay, yeah, you wiggle it a little bit.
Second. You have it for a second.
There it is. All right.
All right, we gotta keep holding it there. And then take it out, put it right here. I like that. That's why you put that. No. Nah. There it is. That's good.
All right.
You keep
Look
it
at
there.
these. Look at this. Okay, so we're out of range.
Yeah,
on-
there it is. Sometimes you gotta stick it out sometimes, you know?
What's our voltage? So we have 14.8 volts on the heater. So is that heater being turned on? Oh, there it is. Now it's being turned on. Let me see if I can trigger off of that. Let's trigger off the heater. Go here. We're gonna go auto. We're gonna change it to B, and we're gonna move it
Your voltage over here. On,
some other way. Where is my trigger dot? We're gonna go negative slope.
You're still at $1.25.
So I'm changing it so that the slope should be dropping. We have a negative slope. Simple edge. We could do pulse width. We could do interval. Let's just keep this. And so we are change that. Where is my trigger? Okay, we're gonna move this thing right over here. There. So channel B is our heater, right?
Yeah.
And let's move this.
I can't see it. It's red, yeah. The red one.
There, that should hold.
Red is heater, yes.
So what's all this other stuff going on here? You see all these spikes happening through here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The little one.
So, do we think that's in the O2 sensor circuit itself, or is it induced voltage from something else?
Induced voltage.
Is that something to be concerned about?
Nah.
It's happening on both signals that we're measuring. Is there typically a cover, or have we exposed the top of the control module by removing a cover or some insulation? Is the control module sitting on top of the engine, or is it off to the side? That's what my question would be here. But because it's happening in both signals that we're looking at, I would say that's an induced voltage, and it's not something that we should be too concerned about unless we're getting plausibility faults on the sensor signal side. Then I might be concerned about it, but we're not getting any faults. I'm not worried about it. All right, let's look at our scan data. What happened? Existing. I'm gonna go our right here, right? So this is our
And it's just 1:15 as a reminder. We got a couple more minutes here.
We got to get moving. So I'm not seeing anything changing here with this sensor. It's staying at 1.5 volts, right? So what do we see on the scan data? It's showing the same thing, right? It's staying at 1.275 volts. So why is that?
It's not. Is it in open loop?
The heater's not. The engine's running, right?
Yeah, engine's running.
Yeah. 14.8 volts. It is pulsing the heater, but it's not really turning it on.
Yeah, it's pulsing it. What it's pulsing it down to? It's grounding it like every half that screen, so like every 100 milliseconds or so.
Yeah, about every. It's also what it's about every. Oh, we're in RPM. Why is that RPM? We're not doing RPM. We're doing time. It's about every 100 milliseconds. Yeah, every 100 milliseconds is pulsing it. Good call, Nico. So it's just checking the integrity of the circuit, basically, making sure that the signal that the circuit is still good. The polling pulse and the heater pulse are just integrity of the circuit. That's all it's doing. We're not seeing somebody want to create like a massive vacuum leak. You know, rev the engine up or open the oil cap or something, and or make a big vacuum leak like we did last week, and let's see if we can push this voltage one way up. I would expect it'll take a few seconds for the cat to be saturated with oxygen and start to see some punch through coming back through the cat. But let's see if we can get this thing to react. It's not really reacting.
Do we get anything? You guys do it again? Now we
Yeah,
got-
maybe we created a large vacuum leak last week. Can we do that again?
Yeah.
What I'd like to show here. Hold on a second. You do that. I'm gonna grab the. Oh yeah. I want to grab the current. I'm just gonna grab the front current. So we got this one. We got this one.
Make sure that's not coolant, right? Hey, that's the vacuum. Okay. So I thought he did the big one. You do the big one or the little one? Okay, okay. Okay, there's a vacuum leak.
Okay, so it should show up here. No response. And then our to follow up with our wideband sensor from last week, we come over here and look at the current, which you couldn't look at with the scope accurately. Where the hell is it? Man, I keep missing these.
There
things.
it's going way. It's falling down now.
Okay. All right, now we finally got the oxygen through the catalyst. So the catalyst will store oxygen to a certain point, so it may take some time. And now look at the heater. The heater is on more. So
Yes.
So we're seeing the heater action. We're seeing the response in the sensor. So let's and then let's look at the current on our front sensor. Where's that? Oh, there's our voltage dropping right there. And then we're gonna go. We're gonna show all.
So does it take? So we're Winter and I were talking about this yesterday. We've got an Audi. We have a 15Q5 with a PO420 code, and we were talking about what actually is measuring the PO420, and it's the amount of time it takes for the rear O2 sensor from a lean condition to go back to a rich condition.
Okay, so the PO420, the general but generally true catalyst test. So when you're driving at a steady load, you've got your rear sensor, say it's a 1 volt signal, but in this case, we've got, potentially 5 volts. It's going to be at a steady value like we saw. And this one was 1.5 or 1.275. It's going to be steady. And that's, and the sensor's pretty much going to stay there. When you let off the throttle from that cruise steady load, there's going to be what? What happens to fuel injectors? When you let off the throttle, what happens? Fuel cutout. It turns off the injectors, right? So that when you let off the throttle, it's not continuing to dump fuel into the engine, which is no longer taking in as much air as it used to. So there's always fuel cutout. So you let off the throttle, fuel cutout occurs. So, and it's going to occur for a certain amount of time. That amount of time is monitored by the ME. And as soon as you tip back into the throttle, it says, okay, there was fuel cutout for this much time. If you don't tip back into the throttle, after about a little more than a second, 1.5 seconds or so, you'll start to see the fuel injectors curve back in, right? So there's always a time frame that it works from. So the fuel injectors were cut out for this much time, then it starts the clock, and then it waits for the rear sensor to pick up that lean condition punching through the cat. So it's the time it takes for the fuel cutout to the rear sensor picking it up that is the catalyst monitor test. And its ability, it's measuring the cat's ability to store oxygen. The longer it takes, the more ability the cat has to store oxygen content, because it does store a certain amount of oxygen for the chemical conversion to convert hydrocarbons and CO, and to some degree a minor amount of NOx, but not really. But if it punches through really quick, the cat's not storing any oxygen at all. If it's a really short time frame, if you get fuel cut out here and the rear sensor picks it up right away, the cat's got an issue. Does that make sense? And so that's our primary function of the rear sensor. Its primary function was to monitor the catalyst and make sure that it was in good condition. Its ability to store oxygen. The other function is to trim. And then if we still have this vacuum leak going, or we fixed it? It looks like we fixed it.
No, well, no, we had to shut it off so we had to shut the engine off so we could hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
So yeah, so it's not running. So on that, is there a way to test that besides we have Bernie's tool for the cat tester?
Bernie's tool is probably the best on the market for that built-in test, because it uses the OBD2 data, so it knows when fuel cutout is. It looks at those parameters. I mean, hands down, his tool for checking that is probably the only thing on the market that's really going to get you in the, an answer that you could, sell something with. There's the temperature tests or the bar wants you to use the temperature test. So if anyone from the bar ever asks you, hey, how do you test the catalyst? You make sure to tell them the temperature test, even though it's a bullshit test, because there should be an increase in temperature through the catalyst, but doesn't really always. It's not really always the case.
I don't think you're allowed to use that test. I think the bar doesn't recognize the heat test anymore. You have to do that O2. You have to do the O2 sensor switching test.
That was part of the last update, but they still accept it, and it's still part of the question, is the temperature test.
The temperature?
Yeah, they need to get rid of it. It's a stupid measurement. But so what I wanted to do here is somebody else could grab this scan tool, because I can seem to control it with the mouse. It just wants to go crazy. I'm trying to find the current for the front sensor.
Here, let's find the current for the front sensor. Here, we got Daniel's going to do it.
I'm not touching it anymore. It just goes nuts.
Okay. There it is. O2 sensor
Select
current.
it and start graphing it.
Yep.
All right. You want to start the car again, and then we still have that vacuum leak happening.
You could make the vacuum leak happen there. Okay, it's the engine's running. And the vacuum leak is almost happening.
Okay, so watch the
There it
current.
goes.
So our current is essentially it's at 0 right now.
Is what at 0?
Our current on the front sensor,
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
0.
our wideband is at 0.
The rear. The rear is definitely
That-
falling.
Yeah, the rear is definitely operating, but the front current should be changing right now. We should see this current rising for the front sensor.
Oh, the rear O2 just corrected.
It did. Did it? It did.
It's correcting.
Yeah, but look at our front current isn't doing what you would expect it to do. So that's kind of bullshit. I'm not 100% sure that this is. If that is not a
Oh,
required.
we're revving the engine right now with the vacuum leak wide open.
Okay. So it may have already made the adjustment to the voltage, so we can't see the front sensor voltage, but the sensor signal, which would be somewhere around, I think it was was it 2.25 volts? Is what you were sitting at as your base voltage, your sensor
No,
voltage, or
it
the
was
2.6?
1.25, right?
1.25. All right.
Yeah, 1.275.
Well, typically what you'll see is like a 1.5 and a 2.5 volt sensor voltage. And so displayed on the scan data, it might be 1.5, but you're seeing 1.25, and it stays there primarily, right? And it makes an adjustment to the current, which adjusts the voltage to bring the voltage right back down to a central point. But it's the pump current or the cell current that is really going to be what's useful for you on the front sensor. And you should be able to see that when it's lean, that current should go up, and when it's rich, that current should go down, right? And it's going to make that adjustment. But this is not doing crap. So let's correct the air leak and see if it does something there. We should be able to see something.
All right. Okay. The
And
air
we're
leak
looking at
is
the rear
corrected.
sensor. Rear sensor's doing it, and look at it's turning on the heater quite a bit more. So that heater is on.
Yeah, now it's turning
So
off. Oh wow, yeah.
now it's bringing it down to maybe about 30% or 40%, 45%. So now it's turning the heater on a little less. Did we fix the air leak?
Yeah, air leak is fixed.
Okay. It's taking a while for
D-
it to respond.
Does everybody see what's happening with the heater being on or off? And the red line over here.
So when it's low,
when's the heater on and when's the heater off?
on here, right? On low.
No,
See,
just
now our voltage
point.
is going back up on the sensor, but the current hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
I'm a little dubious of this.
Yeah.
So this is one of those situations where scan data, if I had a fault for the front sensor and I could see the rear sensor responding, right? But the front sensor is not responding at all. This is when I might want to consider scoping the sensor. This would be a classic example because the scan data doesn't tell me that it's doing anything. If I had a fault for the front sensor indicating that there's a problem with it, I would kind of believe that might be the case because it's not responding. I know that some kind of fuel correction is happening because the rear sensor is responding. So that would be a determining factor for me to say I'm gonna have to scope this, or I'm gonna have to do some circuit investigation on the front sensor. So, putting together the plan of, when do I determine when to use a scope? When I've used the scan data, I've performed a couple of tests, exercised the circuits to verify that there is a problem or isn't a problem. And if I see an anomaly that stands out, like this requires additional testing, then it's time to, I put that in the plan to go and use the scope. It's not where I go first. It's use all of the available data you have in front of you on the scan data. You guys we're over on time. If you want to leave me here for a minute, though, I would like to jump over to the Mercedes information.
Yeah, that's what I just disconnected we just created the leanness again,
Mm-hmm.
and it is changing. See right next to where it says set Y, right to the right of it, right?
Oh,
No,
yes.
to the left. That okay. See the number to the right, immediately to the right.
Oh, yes. Hold on.
No. Get rid of that. See
Yeah.
that number? That number's
Yeah.
changing.
Okay.
That number's changing, but it's not changing on the graph. The graph is like stuck at 0, but that
Okay.
number's changing.
Okay, so let's get rid of this stupid graph, because this graph is pissing me off. Then I was hoping to see it on the graph.
Yeah, so it must just be the graph isn't working, but it's actually showing.
Look at the parameters of the graph. We're up to 127.
Yes.
It's probably we need to change.
You need to bring
this.
that down.
Yeah,
Bring it down to
let's
like
go,
10 milliamps
10,
or minimum
yeah.
or maximum 10,
and then
or say minimum 0 and maximum 10.
because it'll go above and below, so we'll go there.
Okay. Okay, there you go. 10 and I see.
So does that get us?
Oh, but it's going to it's starting at 10, and then the other one's starting at 10. You got to go to 0 to 10.
0 to 10.
Oh,
All
negative.
right.
Oh no. He's got to go. That's
10.
right.
Yeah,
Felipe's
that's
right.
That's it.
Negative
You're right.
10 to negative 10.
Idiot. Yes.
To positive 10.
Right. So the minimum negative 10, and then 10. Sometimes I amaze myself. I can overlook silly stuff. All right, so this should be showing something right now.
So now we're gonna rev it up real quick, or we can just go like. There you go. There it is.
So in here, when the current is high, it's over 0, going above 0, it's a lean condition. When it goes low, that's a rich condition. So it kind of tracks evenly with fuel trim. It's easy to remember. If it's adding fuel, it's a lean condition, right? So if it's plus, same with the current. If it's plus, then it's lean. If it's taking away fuel, it's negative on fuel trims, it's negative on current. So it's kind of an easy way to remember that value.
All right, we got to get back to it. It's 1:35. Yeah. Thank you very much, Eric.
Hey, yeah, I'll send you guys an email with I have the book here. I didn't get a chance to give you an exact answer. I wish I could remember what the acronym stood for. 5 years ago I could have, but and then we'll talk about maybe doing a follow-up with some of this in action. Thanks guys, I really appreciate it, and again, so have a great weekend or a great week.
Thank you, Eric.
Right. It's not Friday anymore, we're doing it Tuesdays.
Have fun.
So, all right guys.
Yeah.
He's in North Carolina.